Hey, what up? Gabe right here. So I'm probably gonna do something like this every time there's like a major shift in the meta, but I thought to do a little guide or maybe like an insight video, whatever you want to call it, into how I let bans affect my Archdemon decision-making process. Now there should be channel markers on the video if you want to skip around to whichever clan you're interested in. I'll also just release this little presentation probably on a Google Drive link in the video description if you don't want to, have to pull up the video every time you want to refer to it. And I'd like to reiterate, this is just how I do it. It's not necessarily how you should do it, but maybe it'll give you, especially if you're a newer player, some insight, or at least get you thinking about how a unit clan ban might affect, or your decision making. Anyway, so we'll start here with the Ratticans. So I released a little general statement here at the bottom on each of these, and I will say that generally a Rattican isn't going to massively affect my decision unless Fallen One is involved. To me, Fallen One may as well be a rat hero. With rats and Fallen One, what you're looking for is the level 1 treasure, aka 2-cost treasure, Hammer of Destiny, which makes all of your 2 and 3 cost units part of the warrior clan. And that's very important for rats because, you got the 2 and 3 cost level rats, pictured right here. You got the auxiliary rat, and then there's also the stick rat and the Rattican. And the ability for them to basically once you have that treasure, you can think of Fallen One as being rattiness, except doubly as effective. It's pretty powerful. You're not probably going to lose any fights until very late game, and you're going to do pretty good. But without that, I just don't think Fallen One has a whole lot. So to me, I listed Fallen One as just being completely gutted if Ratticans are banned, and I just almost will never choose Fallen One in that case. Like, there'd have to be some pretty bad other choices for me to pick them. But then onto the minor losses here. I did list a Syracles. Now, I listed these as minor losses because they aren't really gonna make me think, oh wow, Rattican's banned, so I'm not gonna go these Archdemons, right? But they are probably gonna maybe push it down over another Archdemon that I might be debating it against. So there is a little bit of an effect here. So with the Syracles particularly, to me what it does is it kind of eliminates a lot of his early game tempo. If you get the 2 or 3 cost rats and slot them in slot 1, you're basically getting double your Hero of Power effect, right? You're getting that +6 damage and stunning strike onto the resummoned unit. So especially if you find an early Rattican, it's going to be pretty tough for you to lose fights as a Syracles. So is it enough for me to not choose a Syracles? Not even close, right? Our Syracles has a useful hero power for a lot of clans, but it does mean your early game isn't going to be as isn't going to have the potential that it could have had you had rats. Because currently there's no other units that resummon, right, in the early game. It's really just rats. And Bosferatu, similarly, Bosferatu is a pretty flexible hero, but to me it really shines with rats. But it's not like Fallen One where I simply have no hero power, essentially, relevantly, right? Bosferatu is still going to be useful for basically anything in the game, because, but the thing is with rats, you already have rat bait, and then if you can combine the rat bait with a potent brew, you just really snowball out of control. It's hard to beat that level of scaling, so there's just such a high roll potential there with Bosferatu that it does make me probably bump him down a notch or two if I'm comparing against other heroes. And then 10-foot, similarly, 10-foot is just kind of good enough Archdemon that like seeing Rattican's ban isn't gonna make me skip him because he's just pretty powerful anyway, but it is worth noting that, you know, because his whole hero power revolves around not having links, like Rattican are one of the, you know, completely non-reliant on link clans out there, so with them being banned, it could kind of affect my if I'm choosing between 10 foot and say a ground sin, I might definitely take ground sin if Ratkin was banned, right? And then I put, you know, minuscule losses, like this will almost never affect my decision making, but it is worth noting that like Lars does lose a little bit of early game tempo similar to Asiricles, but it's not nearly the same. A, because Lars is just a better hero right now, I think, than Asiricles, but B, it's also just like, there's other stuff for Lars' hero power that benefits quite a lot, even in the early game, but it is worth noting, you know, without Rats, it might make you choose one of the other super highly rated heroes over Lars, although, you know, 3 of them here are pretty much, in my opinion, the 3 best heroes, but anyway, Baron... I almost didn't list Baron. I could even probably get away with not. I can't think of any time I would actually not choose Baron just because Rats are banned, but it is worth noting that a nice thing about Baron is, like, because Ratticans... You could almost list Coven here as well, but Rats, as a clan, if you are going to go like a full Rat build, they're highly reliant on the artifacts that you get, which means that, you know... the easier way, you know, the easier methods of getting, say, a Potent Brew, right? Now I only have to combine 3 cost units, which cost a lot less, and because they cost a lot less, you're just that much more frequently going to be able to combine them. So it's easier to find Potent Brew, and it's easier to find Rat Swarm, and that's really the 2 reasons that Baron would suffer. There's not much else to it. And then Guardian Zo, similar story to all these 3 champs listed here, like, they're all just so good in their own right that I just would never not, like, pick them, because, you know, I would never shy away from picking them if Rats are banned, but it is worth noting that similar to Osiricles, similar to Lars, Guardian Zo does lose a little bit of early game, you know, high roll potential, because putting a Rat in that slot 4 with Guardian Zone, it's the same kind of story as Asiricles. It's like the re-summoned unit gets the barrier again, and for what it's worth, it gets the 1/1 after it breaks the barrier. It's just a lot of tempo, and it's hard for any hero that doesn't have some early game tempo advantage. You're basically guaranteeing as Guardian Zo that you're going to win in that case, but in the same vein, you probably are going to do just fine anyway with Guardian Zo, whether Rats are there or not. So that's Rats. On to Eldritch. Eldritch is an interesting clan because they're not as in your face as something like Rats, right? You're never like, oh, I'm gonna make an Eldritch build, right? That just doesn't happen because there's nothing about Eldritch that interacts with itself in the way that Rats do, or something like Demons or Greeners do, right? But that doesn't mean that it doesn't affect my choices. It actually affects them, I would say, even more than Rat bans typically do. Not a gigantic amount, mind you, but I did list here that Eldritch ban will affect my decisions somewhat often. So, and I tried to list, really there's 3 units I think of with Eldritch ban. The Mana Guardian here, the Kraken Hunter here, and also the new 5-cost Archer. I of course can't remember his name now, but the one that basically is ranged and it gives linked units Assassin and plus attack. Those are the 3 I'm thinking about whenever I think about an Eldritch ban. So who does that affect the most? Well, it does affect Scarlet Huntress. She really likes to have particularly Kraken Hunter, and particularly that that unit, this unit that I can't remember the name of. Gosh, now I know how happiness felt during the first tournament. I'm happiness incarnate here. What the F is that frickin' unit's name? Well, the nameless unit, you know what I'm talking about. The 5-cost isn't it called like Archeros or something? I think it's like Archeros. Anyway, those really good range units. in particular are the reason I might shy away from Scarlet. And I did list these as moderate losses because like it is enough for me to actually sway my opinion a lot of the time. And I could even make a slight argument that Mana Guardian is also usually pretty good with Scarlet Huntress as one of the frontline beefcakes. You know, it just scales pretty nicely. You would typically want to do a mage build if you could with Huntress. So, you know, something like Fire Slinger in the back, Mana Guardian in the front is totally fine to do. But, you know, but I will say, you know, comparing the 3 units I talked about, for Scarlet, it's mainly the ranged ones that gives her a hit. Because with Scarlet Huntress, the idea is you generally just want some ranged units in back. Bonus points if they can give it an enchanting effect as well, such as the 5-cost Eldritch unit. And you just lose a lot of that with an Eldritch Ban. And Gordo is more really just for the Mana Guardian. You could argue Kraken Hunter as well. I mean, it's definitely somewhat you know, significant, but with Gordo, if you make it to level 6 or level 5, I mean, there's enough 6-cost large units that the Kraken Hunter hit isn't quite so bad, but definitely losing out on Mana Guardian does mean you're gonna have to wait till level 4 to have a hero, or level 3 to have a hero power, so the 4-cost units essentially, because the only, you know, the 2-cost units, there's no large units, and in the 3-cost units, there's only one large unit, and that is Mana Guardian. So you're just not having... In fact, with Gordo, he's a little bit unique in this effect. Not only do you not have a hero power before that 3rd level, you actually have an anti-hero power, right? You're getting one less treasure choice, so you're going to suffer more than even a hero that has no hero power if Mana Guardian is banned. But the thing about Gordo is, you know, if you can get through all that anyway, even without the Mana Guardian, you're generally going to start to snowball later, so he's still a good enough champ that I wouldn't write him off completely if Mana Guardian is banned, but it's definitely going to make me think, right? He doesn't become an S-tier hero in my books when Mana Guardian is banned. It's also worth noting that you can literally build around Mana Guardian as, like, your carry with Gordo. I've certainly done that before. That gets into some more complicated combinations to talk about. Like, I would probably want Elemental also to not be banned in that case, but basically the idea there is that you can combine Mana Guardian so easily with just 2 of them, and you can maybe get 2 or 3, maybe even more, upgraded Mana Guardians pretty early, hopefully. And then you just, basically the idea is you keep spam buying and selling all the cheap elementals or cheap magical units that you see, and you can hyperscale those things up to stupid numbers really fast, and nothing will really be able to touch you. And you can maybe even just win the end game with it too, if you put enough pressure on the lobby. But it is a significant hit to Gordo to lose out on Mana Guardian. Same with Jacko. It's the same story. Jacko doesn't really care about the other units as much, but particularly Mana Guardian, at least Jacko has other hits in the early game that it can get. But to me, Mana Guardian is like the best, arguably the best unit for Jacko. It's a unit you can absolutely build around and make it your carry, and it just gives you so much tempo. Plus, you know, Jacko already gives it some extra stats anyway, so the fact that it can just scale pretty quickly is pretty nice. Then for Xerath, it is specifically the unit, the Archeros unit. We're going to call him Archeros. If he's not Archeros, then my bad. But the 5-cost unit that gives Assassin clearly is going to be good for Xerath, right? Arguably, it's the best thing for Xerath. I could almost argue major loss for Xerath, but to be honest, I just don't really choose Xerath anyway, so it's hard for me to accurately assess Xerath. But it is worth noting that a lot of times there's been times when Xerath comes up and I'm like, I look at the 3 choices, I'm like, okay, Xerath would be the best here, except of course Eldritch is banned, right? And then it's just like, well, that's enough for me to not pick him, right? It's not like there's not other assassins, but the ability to make any unit an assassin is just like really good with Xerath, so it's a pretty big hit to have Eldritch banned. Then I put minor loss for Rokwa. I could almost argue moderate loss for it, because honestly, for Rokwa, it's the same story with a lot of these, like Gordo and Jacko. Like, It's a Mana Guardian. It's just such a good unit to build around. I think I even had a video recently where I did it, but I've done it a lot too, just in my non-recorded videos. Like, I'll start level 2, whatever I choose is whatever, and I'll just throw it away the minute I find a Mana Guardian, even if it costs me a few turns of losing to build around that, because like I said, you can just, it's so easy to scale this Mana Guardian up, and if you can early on just get this giant unit and have all of the enemies just sacrifice all their people into it, you know, you're basically only countered in the mid game there by somebody that just has ridiculously high attack on some units. Otherwise, you can like 1v7 their board with a good Mana Guardian and Rokwa. But Rokwa is just kind of so good and flexible that I'm not gonna not choose him usually if Eldritch is banned. And then Lars is similar to Scarlet Huntress, but I think Lars is just so flexible that it's not as big of a hit as it is with Scarlet Huntress. But with Lars, it's just that those are really good range units, and usually the idea with Lars is that you want to find Flambar and hyperscale some backliner, and usually the best backliners are going to be range units. So you're losing out on 2 of the best range units in the game when Eldritch is banned, but luckily there's still quite a lot of other ranged units that you can build around, or even non-ranged units, and I don't think an Eldritch ban affects Lars that much. Now we're on to Elemental Ban. Very popular builds right now, by the way, as Elementals, I've noticed. I run it quite often myself with mixed results. I don't necessarily think that it's incredibly consistent, but it definitely has high roll potential, I'll tell you that. But it can, to me, it's a build that quite often can earn me a not top 4, which is not what you want, right? But I still do it a lot. It's still pretty powerful. Now, I would say Elemental Ban, of everything that we listed so far, is the one that affects my decisions the most of what we looked at so far. So I said pretty often. There's definitely ones coming up in the future that, you know, affect my decisions more, but Elemental is very often affecting my hero choice. And, you know, I didn't list many heroes here, but the fact is, particularly like the ones that I have listed, it usually just, I could even argue borderline gutted for Githonk and Joe Binks. The only reason it isn't is because there is other stuff that you can hit, but like if Elemental combined with, say, Greeners are banned, then I would argue Githonk and Joe Binks are relatively gutted. But even without, you know, let's not think about other bans. Let's think specifically about an Elemental ban. Their entire clan is based off linking, so obviously the 2 heroes that their hero power is just literally linking based, it's going to be a major loss. I mean, you can think about it this way even, like, you basically don't have a hero power when elementals are banned until level 3. You know, 4-cost units such as Boost and Serpentina and Blood Mage, they are the first units that are non-elemental that actually have a linking synergy. So, you know, let's be honest, like you know, we see a lot of 8-player lobbies now, and as players get better, you can take a lot of damage early if you don't have a hero power. And to go through level 3 particularly, or sorry, level 2, without a hero power is a lot of times pretty devastating. And then you're playing off your back foot from there on out, even if you do get your hero power starting at level 3 and onward, right? But yeah, so linking, obviously it's going to affect Githonk and Joe Binks. And I also put Gordo because almost all of the late game and all of the good elementals are large. And that's a lot of units that are easy combinations that are now out of the pool for Gordo. You know, I still would pick Gordo, like, but if say Elemental and Eldritch was banned, now I'm like, wow, Gordo doesn't look so enticing to me, right? You know, you can think of, when you go through these, you can combine the fact that one moderate loss plus another moderate loss, because there's always going to be 2, maybe even in the future 3 clans banned at any time. You can add them up, and 2 moderates might equal a major loss, right? In most cases, I would say that it does. And that's absolutely the case for Gordo. Because what, with Eldritch and Elemental Ban, there's still other large units, but there's not that many left, right? And certainly not that many that are super enticing to pick. And then I listed Roquan, Guardian Zoe. It's always going to be a similar story with Roquan and Guardian Zoe. They're just such good, flexible heroes that it's tough for me to actually say that I wouldn't pick them when certain things are banned, but it does make me think twice, because Roquan really likes a build that hyperscales Earth Elemental. If it's pretty easy. Elementals are the most consistent user of ambush tactics because you don't even need to find the stealth spell, right? You can just use the Shadow Elemental and you can give stealth to whatever elemental in slot 4 that you want, and often that's going to be an Earth Elemental that you hyperscale your whole board to. And in the case of Roquan, keep in mind, tank does not care about stealth. If your stealth unit has tank, they'll still get attacked. And usually that's what you want in the case of an Earth Elemental. I find in an Earth Elemental build, you can get enough health on that thing. Think about getting it up to 100 health by maybe level 5 or 6. That's not that out of the question with an ambush tactics, especially if it's an upgraded Earth Elemental. Similar to what we talked about with the Mana Guardian unit, the enemy will just ram all 7 units into it, and unless they have a super high attack unit, you're going to 1v9 their whole board. But again, you can do that with a lot of units, so is it really going to make me say I'm not going to go Roquan without elementals? Probably not. And same with Guardian Zoe, similar story. It's like you just want a good unit in slot 4 so often with elementals, and obviously Guardian Zoe has a great benefit there with having a barrier on it, right? But again, so flexible that I'll make anything work with Zoe, right? Now, Warden bans. This is an interesting clan. They're similar somewhat to me to Eldritch, where they have a little bit more like within their clan synergy going on, but not a whole lot, to be honest. Like, they kind of are more of a support clan, in my opinion, that combines with other various heroes. And as a result, the Warden ban actually affects my decision quite often, even more than Elementals, I would say. And it's really just these 2 units right here that account for that, Manifest and Unholy Flame. This unit right here gives any linked warriors a barrier. And obviously the Manifest just, it dies and it gives you mana. So I listed Lars as a major loss here. The only other one, this will be a little bit of spoiler for the upcoming ones, but the only one that affects Lars more would be Coven. But I think by far, Coven and Warden are the 2 things that Lars wants to see, far and away, over every other clan. And to have Manifest not available is a pretty big hit to Lars' early game. Like, you usually want both Manifest and Flambar open for Lars. The Manifest does give you early game tempo to buy more stuff, and also gives you, once you hit level 3, the ability to hard roll and find Flambar ASAP, and also hard roll and find 3-cost treasures to hopefully get Arcane Offering. And if Manifest is banned, that does hurt that game plan a bit. Would I not choose it if Coven is still open? Probably still going to choose it, right? But I might choose one of the other S tier champs over it if Manifest is unavailable, right? And then Countess is more toward the Unholy Flame. Countess, you think of it mainly as a vampire hero, but really it's a warrior hero as well, because Clanlord is such an important part of that game plan, and to a certain extent Forsaken Knight. Both of them are warriors, and a big part of your ability to scale into something late game is Unholy Flame. And keep in mind, you're usually, unless you find a Force Amp early enough, or an Unholy Warrior, you're probably not scaling the health very well on your units. You're definitely hyper scaling their attack, but your health is still pretty low, and you can get around a lot of the downside of your late game by having those shields with an Unholy Flame. But if you don't even have the option to do that, To me, that's a significant hit on Countess, and I'll often shy away from choosing Countess if Warden is banned. All-Seeing. Now this kind of falls into the Xerath territory for me, where like I almost feel unqualified to even talk about the demon because I just don't choose it. I've never had that good experiences with All-Seeing, but I think similarly to Countess, it really wants the Unholy Flame to be a part of the game plan, because and even Buke, you know, Buke is the 4-cost unit that just naturally has barrier and scales naturally when the barrier breaks. I think World Eater really likes to see either of those. Like a Buke is usually a really good target for All-Seeing. You know, it's a good tempo unit on level 3 to get to, because you're probably taking a lot of damage up until then. So a good tempo unit that scales itself and later on will be good as a target for your World Eaters. And then on top of that, just, you know, if you have the right linking treasures to support it, because, you know, by default you can't really combine World Eater and Unholy Flame together to do anything without some extra links. But if you can get some extra links from something like an Arcane Offering, now you can get some sort of hyperscaled warrior to get a shield and also take the hit from World Eater. So I would say it definitely, if I ever thought about doing All-Seeing, I probably wouldn't choose it if Warden was not there. And with Jacko, it's, I'd say more similar. It's still the Unholy Flame with Jacko. It's like, often your late game, you know, you're running a Vampire Knight, or you're running warriors that are getting charge, or becoming mounted from beasts, but, you know, they're a warrior, so they're gonna benefit potentially from Unholy Flame. You take away a lot of your late game flexibility with Warden banned with Jacko. But Jacko's good enough, similar to Lars, that I'll probably still take it in a lot of the cases, but it will definitely significantly drop it like a tier. And then Guardian Zoe, I almost, I had planned actually, I should just put it into minor loss, but I think that people they place too much importance on the 1/1 scaling aspect of Guardian Zoe. I'm telling you right now, if they nerfed Zoe and took away the 1/1 scaling from bears, he would still be an S tier champ. I'm telling you right now. It's just, that's how it would be. I think people miss the point with Zoe. The point is that you're getting a free barrier on slot 4. The 1/1 scaling is just a cherry on top. You really don't need to like make some build that has a ton of barriers to cash in on heroes, on Zoe's hero power. In fact, like by the time you're getting the units that would do all that, outside of maybe an Automata, like it just, you know, it's just not like that relevant. It's okay, right? But like, to me, I rarely run Unholy Flame on Zoe. I rarely run it, and my win rate with Guardian Zoe it's one of my best win rate champs. In fact, I think I'll have to go back and check. I've either won all of my games with him, or I've like lost one of them. It's one of the two. So it's not like it's like an incorrect way to play Zoe that I'm doing. Like, to me, what it does is it sets you up to not get hard countered by Iron Ogre anyway. And even you can make the additional argument that if Warden is banned, it's almost useful for you as Zoe, because now you know Iron Ogre isn't even in the pool, right? So I would never steer away from Zoe if Warden isn't banned. I just put it there because, I don't know, technically it does make your bukes not as high rolly as they could be, or sometimes it takes away a little bit of scaling if you are going to run an Unholy Flame, but I think it should go in minor loss. It's my bad right there for not putting it there. And then Batabat really just comes down to Mana Pest. It's the most often unit you're going to buy with it. And it's like, you know, I've often made the argument that if you don't get a super early Mana Pest and you aren't Lars, it's often not worth it to buy one if you're like on level, like halfway through level 3 or even beyond that. But I think the exceptions are Lars and Batabat, because with usually my argument is like you're paying 2 mana to get a benefit that doesn't like in terms of mana efficiency doesn't really benefit you until 2 turns later. But with Batabat, that's a little bit different because it's 1, so you realize it immediately and you can keep realizing it, and it's just an easy way to like combine them and get treasures. So I think it does make Batabat a little bit worse, but it's not a huge thing. It's not a huge thing. And then I was probably being a little bit facetious here with Demonstra, because I think Demonstra is just so good that I would never not pick her because Warden is banned. But it is worth noting Manifest is one of the best, if not the best, early game units you can see with Demonstra, because you're guaranteed to combine it with Hellhound, right? And it just makes it a unit that doesn't even, you know, you put 2 Hellhounds on a board, and that thing is now like, you know, a very formidable thing that can kill the enemy. Maybe even 2 for 1, and give you mana in the process. It's just a pretty good unit. But really, am I gonna not pick Demonstra because Warden's banned? Never. It's really the major loss ones that affect me, all for those different reasons. And as a result, I do actually sway it quite often on those heroes. Probably All-Seeing excluded though. But similar to like Xerath, it's like, there have been times I wanted to pick All-Seeing out of the 3 that I saw, and it was like, but Warden's banned, you know? Like, do I really want to? Probably not. Now, Undead Ban, this is, you know, caveat here. Right now, they're temporarily, permanently banned anyway. But, you know, I don't know how long that'll last. And it is worth noting that how they affect things, right? And you know, I kind of listed the 2 units that generally would affect my decision making here: the Gen and the Headhunter. Now they might be, Undead is getting a big rework, so it's not, I don't know if I should spend too much time on this one, but I'll just briefly go over why they are the way that they are. Scarlet Huntress really wants just backline units to get scaled. Usually they're ranged units that may or may not have an innate way to scale them, and Degen is one of your only options to scale it. And if it's banned, that sucks. And on top of that, Headhunter's pretty good for Scarlet Huntress too, because having some frontline that can resummon and actually be pretty beefy is a godsend for Huntress. It really just protects your backline so well. And then Lars, it's a minor loss, mainly because of Headhunter. You know, if you can actually run Headhunter in like slot 5 sometimes with Lars, and you're probably going to fill 4 slots with units, which is pretty crazy. With Jacko, it's just a solid mounted unit. With Rokwa, it's actually the Bone Zealot that I think about with Rokwa. It's just a pretty good unit. You know, it's not as good as like a Mana Guardian is, but it is a unit you can definitely build around. You know, if you can upgrade it, you're getting usually 2 attack per turn scaled, and that can carry you through the early game pretty well. And then Zoe, similar to Rats, just putting a Headhunter up in slot 4 is really good. You know, it resummons the unit right into slot 4 and gets the shield, so pretty good. And for what's worth, when Undeads were there, it was somewhat often that it would affect my decision making. Now into Demons, just a very consistent clan, a very straightforward clan, in my opinion. There are quite often, though, even though I haven't listed many heroes here, quite often they do affect my decision making. And you know, I put major loss for Syracles, and to me, in terms of a Syracles, this is the most this is the clan ban that will affect him the most. Is he untakeable if demons are banned? Not necessarily, but he goes from like pretty enticing to like ugh, and like icky in my eyes if demons banned. However, like say demons banned but rats aren't banned, I still might like a Syracles as a tempo champ, right? But it is worth noting the late game and the mid game take a big hit here, because to me, if I take a Syracles, my best use of him is going to be essentially just to get that that guaranteed haste, which is really nice, particularly with the Hellfire cannon. You know, when you're running demons, I highly recommend always trying to get speed potion if you can, and a Syracles just starts with it naturally, along with having some nice early game tempo. You know, if you plan on going demons, early game can be the struggle. And having that extra damage boost is just nice, and also the ability to go first is nice. So it's a pretty big hit if demons are banned for Syracles. And then I put moderate for Scarlet. This is similar to the Eldritch, where you just lose 2 of the best backline units. You know, with Scarlet, you don't really have to run a full demon build, but you do want good backline ranged, and the more ranged units that are, you know, the more ranged units end up banned, the less good Scarlet Huntress is going to be for you. And then 10 foot, similar to the Rat ban, it's like, it's just a good champ, so I'm usually going to pick it even if they're banned, but it does put them down a notch because it's one of the best things you can run, even though you don't get that super good late game that the Hellfire Knight, the 7-cost demon, provides because there's no linking. Up until then, there's absolutely no need for linking in demons, and on top of that, you know, these units, they don't start at good stats, right? 6-3 and 3-2. There can be awkward turns, especially if you find them later than you'd like. It's awkward to slot them in, especially if you're on like low health. But 10 foot never really has a problem of low health, and on top of that, they just come in with good stats already, so it's not like you're taking a huge tempo hit. I find demons pretty good with 10 foot, even if the top end is gutted a bit. I actually find that 10 foot is a really good demon champ. And Gordo really just comes down to the, it's really easy to combine the Hellfire Cannon and, more importantly, the Red Beast. The Red Beast is so nice when upgraded, and as we know, 6-cost treasures are great. I could care less about 5-cost treasures, really, but particularly the Red Beast is a decent hit with Gordo, but Gordo, again, is pretty flexible, and probably you're going to still pick him if demons are banned. And then Coven bans. Coven ban is probably the one that I think affects my decision the most, which is weird to say when only 4 heroes are listed here, right? But the fact of the matter is, you know, I put Gigantic Lust here. You could almost argue Gutted as well, especially with Undead being, with Scarlet Huntress in particular, with Undead being permabanned right now. Without a Flambar, without a Djinn, you're very limited on how you're going to scale your back line. And on top of that, Babam is just a really good unit with Scarlet Huntress. I would argue Babam is at its best with Scarlet Huntress. So a Coven ban, Flambar is just so good with Scarlet Huntress. Same with Lars, like, and both of these units really, Babam and Flambar are so good with Lars that they're different heroes when Coven is banned versus when they're not. They go from like S tier heroes. Scarlet's probably not a S tier right now because Undead is permabanned, but you know, Lars is definitely an S tier hero. They probably go down to like a B or A, depending on what the other clans are, right? Like I said, you can kind of combine some of the others together. Like if both Manifest and Flambar are banned, like I don't have a huge reason to go Lars, especially, and then you factor in Undead as permabanned too, right? Like Hellhound is out, or Headhunter's out of there. Like Lars doesn't have much in that case. But yeah, I will pretty much, it's very hard for me to pick Lars or Scarlet Huntress when Coven is banned. And even like Kathunk and Joe Binks, like while I will say Elemental and Greener are particularly the good things that you want with Kathunk and Joe Binks, Flambar is still very good with them. That's kind of third on the list for them in my opinion. And to a certain extent, Babam as well, right? Like, you have all these extra links. Babam probably not so much with Joe Binks, but definitely with Kathunk, because like you can really get sometimes, you know, without any artifact support, you can get like you can get like maybe 3 extra Babam procs, right? Same with the Flambar. So yeah, I mean, the Coven definitely affects these heroes, and you know, there's other heroes I just haven't listed. It's like, in my head, you know, think of it in terms of Scarlet Huntress. Like, how much am I going to rely on a ranged unit for my particular hero, my particular Archdemon, I guess, and Coven can definitely affect that. And gosh, I just thought of something I meant to say at the beginning of this video. Well, if I haven't mentioned it, I'll mention it now. This is not the case for Atlantean, but for so you'll notice I never list like all-seeing, or like for the Rattican Ban I didn't list the rat Archdemons. It's because the game will not allow those heroes to come up when that particular clan is banned, right? It would just be pointless to play like Ratch when Rattican is banned. So they don't actually even show up when the clan is banned. So that's something I should have mentioned at the start. My bad. Anyway, Atlantean Ban. This is one that pretty much never affects my decision making. I did list a bunch as minor losses just to think about, I guess. Roquois, mainly it's just that Bustation. It's kind of nice. If you weren't aware, you can have your highest health unit gain tank as normal with Roquois. But if you take a Bustation on top of that, it will still gain a tank. So it's still technically, it allows you to have 2 tanks, and it also allows you to get the 3 health on death to the Bustation as well. At that point in the game, the 3 health isn't gigantically a difference maker, but it is something. And it is nice to have 2 tanks in a lot of cases, so it's worth thinking about. With Baron, it's mainly that so often with Baron you're gonna run mages, and even though Serpentina did get kind of gutted, she's not unusable, and she can still be pretty good if you get a proper spell spam build going off. And by far the Baron is your most likely hero to get the right artifacts for that with any consistency, right? Because it's just so much cheaper and more frequent that you can pair things at certain levels, right? Batabat, there's just a lot of beasts in the Atlantean clan. But fortunately for Batabat, there's a lot of beasts across the board, and a lot of the beasts are even just kind of unbannable, right? Like the mounted, I don't know how to pronounce it, but like I always call it Geico, maybe it's Gecko, I don't know. But the one that gives mounted units 4/4. For what it's worth, Werebeast, but Werebeast is pretty bad right now. I would really put that one into the running. But yeah, there's just a lot of beasts, so Batabat isn't like gutted by an Atlantean ban, but it is felt a bit, right? Crowley, it's the same story as Baron. Crowley really likes to have a spell spam build, and Atlantean has the Serpentina. And for what it's worth, it has the Hydrax, which combos with the Serpentina, which only really works if you spammed a ton of spells. If you only cast 10 spells and you have a counter of 10, that's not really that relevant when you drop a Hydrax in. But if you got like 30 spells casted, now you kind of got a pretty good tempo play when you drop that Hydrax in. And same story with Insidious, wants to have spell spam, typically. With Pandora, I only really listed it because Anemonade is such a good hit early with Pandora. Am I going to take or not take Pandora because Elenia's banned? Probably not. Like, it's the same story with all of these. I'm still just going to pick these heroes whether or not Atlantean is banned or not, but it is something to think about, right? And at Kosh, it's the shark. So it's just easier for your Dollfish to get some initial stats to help with getting those 3 slays off, or ends. And once the shark pops, it just gets a little bit of extra scaling, which is nice, right? I would assume if you choose a Kosh, Dolish would be something you want. I just don't really choose a Kosh anymore because I don't think he's that good. But for what it's worth, you could almost argue him actually might be the only one I'd put as maybe a major loss, because the shark seems to be probably the best unit for a Kosh. But yeah, because I never choose a Kosh, it doesn't really affect my decision. Then we got the Greeners. They are one that definitely affects my decision pretty often. So like Pandora, for example, I think really benefits from Grek. It's a great unit to get because, it really benefits basically from everything other than Stunning Strike. Siege is the one I think you want the most. A Grek that you can scale to have pretty good attack that ends up with Siege is actually pretty devastating, and your opponent really has to play around it. And often through the mid game they can't do that because they probably don't even know They can't expect that it's coming, right? Late game, they might have a little bit more opportunity to play around it, but it also makes them forced into awkward board positions quite often. Ranged is also pretty good with it. I'm not going to complain about a ranged Grek. And stealth is like somewhat okay. It's less bad than most stealth hits on units are with Pandora, because often you do want to slot one Grek, and to guarantee that it basically is able to get its hit off can be pretty good. Think of like an Unholy Flame, stuff like that. It really counters those type of things. And Akash, similar story. I would have to imagine a Grek is one of the main reasons you would play Akash. So if Grek is not there, you still have, I guess, Clanlord and the Shark potentially, but Grek is one of the best units for Akash. And Blightbringer, this is just a holistic thing with the clan as a whole. I think that generally Jin is going to do the same thing that Boost wants to do. And with Blightbringer, you don't get the same massive downside that you get with a Jin, where when it gives you the Blight, it's not a good thing, right, with all of the other heroes. But with Blightbringer, it's fine. Now, it's almost not worth bringing up, because I'm pretty sure Blightbringer is getting completely reworked, but for what it's worth, if he does remain as he has been, where your units with Blight gain permanent stats on death, equal to the number of Blight that they have, he is at its best with greeners, in my opinion, because Djinn just slots in really well. It's even arguably better than a Boost, especially after the Boost nerf. And then Cthulhu and Joe Binks, it's the same story with Elementals. It's like greener is heavily based off linking. Without a Boost, there's not a huge reason to build like a full greener build board, right? There are rare cases where you can do it. I've done it, but mainly you're looking at Boost as a very key component of greeners. And with Cthulhu and Joe Binks, you would want to be able to get those extra link benefits. Those are the major ones, and those are the ones that are most likely going to affect my decision. And then, as usual, the minor, it doesn't really matter that much. I will say for Baron, though, it is pretty nice to have Sprout available. So many of those 3-cost treasures are so good. Scholar's Pledge, Arcane Offering, Force Amp, Double Ritual Casting, so on and so forth. And, buy 2 Sprouts and boom, you got a choice of it. And the loss is felt a little there, but honestly, Baron's so good that, I just don't care. Guardian Zoe is mainly just pretty nice, because it's like you can put things like a Captain in slot 4, and it protects it against the first potentially big hit. And generally, it's just, I find you're more likely to actually get a survivable hit when you're attacking with Captain, but you also don't want it in the first few slots, because you want units to die and free up space so that you can actually summon the units. So it's just really nice to put a Captain in slot 4 after it's been scaled up, of course. And it continues to gain a little bit of extra scaling from that hero power anyway. And hopefully there's a boost feeding it still, but it's just nice to have it in that slot. Let all of your slots 1 through 3 potentially die before it then takes damage, and actually cash in on the Captain's power. And with Jacko, you're just losing a very good unit for Jacko, which is the Cavalry. But there's always Mana Guardian, so it's like if greener and Eldritch are banned, you might not be so happy with Jacko, but honestly there's still other hits. Like, I'll probably still choose Jacko anyway. Asircles, as we've talked about with Grek, you usually want to get that hit off. It really counters a lot of builds, and the fact that you just guarantee haste with a little bit of extra damage is pretty nice, right? And Zerath is, just a good user of Grek as well. But again, I don't really use Zerath, so I'm not really qualified to talk that much. And then Morg, it's a similar story with Baron. Sprout is just a really easy way to get that stupid stat increase, right? Just buy 2 of them, and now you got like a, like a 10-10? You have a 10-10 unit that you can have potentially in like turn 2.2 or 1.2 or something. Like, that's pretty powerful. But Morgue does what Morgue does with whether you have a Sprout or not. It's just kind of nice to have Sprout. And then last, and maybe least, we have the Vampire Ban. It affects my decision making very rarely. Well, we'll just go through it here. So the units I usually think about are Forsaken Knight and mainly Clan Lord, right? Which have both received pretty big nerfs since the beta, or the open beta. But, you know, for what it's worth, Pandara really likes Clan Lord anyway, right? Like, if you can especially get ranged on it, that's pretty nice. It pretty much guarantees if you do get the kill that you're not going to die, and then you get the stats. Quite good with Clan Lord. That's really it with Pandora. He just really wants Clan Lord. Same with Akash. Really wants Clan Lord. Without it, you're losing a lot of Akash power. Now with Jacko, it's both of them. It really wants Clan Lord. I could argue it wants Bloodsucker as well, and it wants Vampire Knight, right? So it actually, and it probably would love a Blood Mage too, right? So of all the bans that affect Jacko, I think Vampire is the heaviest hit. It's the only one that would significantly actually sometimes make me sway away from Jacko to another hero. Now, keep in mind, I still think Jacko's so good that a Vampire Ban is not gonna like make me like not pick Jacko, but there's enough loss there that it affects Jacko quite a lot. Now, minor loss here. One second. This music is obnoxious. Alright, sorry about that. It just like, I guess the video went on longer than I thought, and the original music that I had went to Super Metroid music. It is what it is. But, anyway, what was I talking about? Oh yeah, so Lars, the funny thing is, you know, if you'd played during open beta before the nerf to Forsaken Knight, I would list major loss for Lars, because Forsaken Knight was stupidly good with Lars, but really it just comes down to Forsaken Knight. It's still like pretty okay with Lars to get double the effect, especially if it gets upgraded, because then you're getting quadruple the effect, right? So you can get some stupid amounts of attack. It's just not that relevant now though for Lars. Like, Vampire Knight is much better, I think, with Jacko, because Jacko usually naturally steers toward a build that can use Forsaken Knight to better effect. And I didn't even list Scarlet Huntress here, but the old the old Forsaken Knight would definitely go where Scarlet Huntress is, and who knows, maybe it will get a buff at some point. I don't think it's a useless unit. I just think it's pretty underwhelming a lot of the time, outside of very specific builds. But anyway, so Lars, I'm probably not going to get affected with the current version of Forsaken Knight. And same, you know, Fallen One, there's a lot of good warriors, mainly these two, right? Like, but I don't know. Is it going to make me not pick it? Probably not, because I'm just trying to go rats if I'm Fallen One. I'm not really picking Fallen One to actually do some sort of warrior build. I guess I could, but I think it's just significantly worse than going rats. But, you know, I guess if you miss on rats, it's nice to have vampires available. It's nice to have these warriors available. But honestly, does a Vampire Ban affect my decision very often? Nah, it's pretty rare. And that's all of them. Hopefully that was useful. Like I said, I'll have a link in the description to just, you know, go to it without having to view the video if you don't want. And I'll probably redo a video of this nature after every major meta shift. Because obviously the timing matters, right? Like I said, in the olden days, this ban list would look different for Lars and Scarlet Huntress, but in the current climate, this is what it kind of looks like, and that'll continue to shift as the game evolves, right? But yeah, anyway, thanks for getting through it here with me. As always, thanks for watching, and until next time, peace.